computer's gonna be going
So
next.
I got there 81.
Yeah.
Well, I got there in 80, but official meeting was January 3rd.
We'll have to do that. And now we can officially start the meeting at 6:01. All is present. And any public comments for items not on the agenda? Discussion, not action, okay. Town reports. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Couple of things on the TA report worth mentioning. So the first one, it'll be an agenda item, is to congratulate the newly appointed officials, and thank you to those that served and stepped down. So the fiscal year 26 budget did pass at town meeting, and so as of July 1, we will be in fiscal year 26 year, so we're in the process of finishing up fiscal year 25. Last year at this time, the select board held a very lengthy orientation with how much is taking place right now and with how many agenda items we have lined up, I didn't think that it would be effective to add such a long thing in addition to it. So the one member who had not participated, we did create the packet that was provided last year, but I would appreciate some feedback from the board to see how you want to handle an orientation or going over to make sure that you as a board are all on the same page and everyone has the same understanding of the board's roles, as individuals and as a board. So whether you want to have an orientation, whether you want to have a retreat similar to last year, I'd appreciate the board's feedback so we can start thinking about whatever the process might look like. No feedback right now? No? Okay.
We're talking about having a retreat of some sort coming up. We'd like to revisit that as of last year.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought the retreat was helpful. I'd do that again. I thought it was helpful to have somebody separate facilitating. And then I do think we had talked, as an orientation, I think one thing that might be helpful is to meet with the town attorney who, I don't know, most of us haven't met in person, and preferably in person, and just sort of, have him go over in particular, sort of the guidelines for how we need to operate as a board, to stay kind of
I think that's a great idea.
in the guardrails of, so we, I think it's always changing, kind of how people think about it, so would be what I recommend, and I think we could do that sometime this summer, but it doesn't have to be.
I think that'd be great considering that we do have a fairly new attorney and most people in the community and as a board probably have not met him.
And what I would be most interested in from him is his guidance on how we communicate and stay kind of, in the guidelines, but how we can be as efficient as possible communicating, how to use email, what platforms we can use. And I think this board's been pretty good about not abusing that, but that kind of thing.
Okay. If the board is interested in that, I'm happy to email him and try to ask some general questions about that and see what his schedule would be like to potentially in July sometime make a trip out to the island. David?
I would agree with that. In the past, we've held some of these conferences off island, and I think that that's not a bad idea to make it easier, first of all, for the attorney to join us, and second of all, get us some free food. Maybe that's not the primary.
Well, and I would guess if he's never been here and wants to come out.
Has
he ever been here?
I don't think so. He's participated remotely quite a bit, but to my knowledge, since he's become the official town attorney, he has not been here. So, well, we actually have a couple places to bring him to lunch. It might be a nice treat.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll ask him and see what would work best in his schedule.
What's his name?
His name is Ben McCall.
I like the idea of a meeting with him and also having a retreat for the group of us.
Okay. The one thing that I did put in front of all of you, a couple of months, the select board did adopt code of conduct. This is something that at the next meeting, this board will go into an executive session and have a list of any board member that is up for renewal or is new to be joining the board, and you will have the opportunity to make the decision whether you want those individuals to be on the boards or not. After that process, every board member will be signing the code of conduct, so it's a guideline for all members of who are serving on any municipal boards to know how they should or shouldn't behave. And so no bigger role model than the select board being the first ones to sign the code of conduct. And so I have those in front of you if you want to take some time and read through them. And then when you get a chance, sign them and then provide the signed copy back to us. We'll add it to the personnel files. And then we will do that with every other board member that joins. All right, so the next thing is the same thing that's been on several agendas, is just the committee board members are needed. Planning Board and Board of Adjustment and Appeal specifically are the two boards that are suffering pretty hard right now. Planning Board will have several different things in front of them throughout the summer. They, a couple of weeks ago, had a public hearing, and so they'll definitely be needing some assistance. So if anybody knows of anyone or anybody that is interested, please let us know. So the next thing is FEMA money. So we have officially received a little over $1.2 million. It has been deposited in our bank account. We officially have the money. Which is huge for a lot of the projects that money was directed towards. We are in the process of working with the town auditor to set up proper general ledger accounts. So then it makes the auditing process simpler, and we can keep track of the funds more appropriately. And so when we have that all set up, what I'll do with this board, especially since there are new numbers, is really provide more of an outline of what the area is, what the town received for funds, how much of it was bringing it back to pre-disaster versus mitigation. So then the current board has a better understanding of what this money should be used for, because the next process really is going to be for this board to decide how you want to proceed in doing some of the work on some of these projects. So that's something that probably the second meeting in July, I'll provide that to you, and we should have all that together. Any questions about that? Carol?
Not a question, but I just want to say thanks for all your hard work on that, because it really paid off. And I know a lot of
It
towns
did.
have not received any money. So anyway, that's huge for the township, so thanks for all your.
We should be getting an additional $75,000, and that was really for, I kept track of all of my time and kept track of some of other people's times, and then we had to go through the process of, providing all the information. $75,000 definitely wasn't what it was, but the new representative, who was so amazing and helpful, informed me that instead of me providing every hour and what I did and what project I worked on, that they could take 5% of the total cost and automatically apply that to us. And so she did that. So we would have, yes, we will probably receive the money, but it's several months out. But that, due to her help, is really going to be, and that's money that will end up going into miscellaneous income, because it's not for, it's basically the government recognizing that the municipality's time and the employees' times went into it, and that's kind of a reimbursement cost for it. So that'll just be additional funds that will be received sometime down the future, but all of this is specific to specific projects due to damages, so.
I'm just curious, when did you start that process of submitting?
So this money is a result of the January 2024 storms. The project process started within 2 weeks after the storms, and it was pretty involved for several months, and then it kind of dwindled down the last few months. But on any given week, there's been some time or attention that I've had to give to FEMA work. So, and so due to these storms, South Shore Drive workshop, so on June 25th at 6 p.m. here at the hall, The select board will be hosting a workshop with GEI, who is the engineering firm that was hired by the town, and they will be providing a report that recently was received, that was shared with the select board a couple of weeks ago, the previous board, about the proposed scope of work for South Shore Drive, the embankment restoration, or what their suggestions and recommendations are for short-term, long-term, and costs associated. And so about $735,000 of that 1.2 million is money specifically for South Shore Drive. So that will be an important meeting to attend. Carol?
And I don't know if you saw that email, but so the GEI person, Lisa Vickers, she was thinking of coming out early to meet with the folks near Jenks Road that are interested in the parking reconfiguration. And she also mentioned meeting with the select board prior to the public workshop to kind of go through, I think, all the projects they're working on and provide an update to the select board. So that would probably have to be noticed, but I think the goal was to kind of just give the board kind of a chance to, particularly if there are resident, they're involved in sort of what projects they're working on, what stage they're in, and if we have any questions. So that seemed like a good idea. So,
Yeah, if the board, I was gonna mention that under communications, it's all relative, and so if more than 3 of you are interested and wanna attend, then yes, we will absolutely have to hear that, and, if we advertise something for like 4 o'clock, that way from 4 to 5 or 5:30, she can, or from 4 to 5, she can give a, brief update on the scope of the work. Relative to all the different projects that they're hired. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
So 4 o'clock will be the time for you?
Well, I think, she was actually thinking of coming out
On the two.
earlier. It depends on when the residents might be available. But she was thinking of giving herself a little time in between the 2 meetings, so maybe like
3:30, 4, yeah.
3 or 3 to 4, something like that. But I think we can figure that out. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were taking.
No, that's totally fine. So what we could do is we can kind of connect and tidy up the schedule a little bit. As far as advertisement goes, we need to notice it 3 business days prior to it taking place. So we do need to make sure that we notice it, 3 days before that Wednesday meeting. But in the meantime, in the next several days, we can kind of figure out when, if the residents at Jenks Road are able to meet, and what would be the best timing for Lisa, and then kind of circle back with this board as far as the proper timing, and then we can advertise it. Does that work? Okay. So the other thing is, in the packet, you received information, expense and a revenue report. So most of you are aware, some of you are not, but number of months ago in the audit process, the auditors determined that the June 2024 bank reconciliation had some discrepancies in it. That was as a result of them doing the audit for fiscal year '24. What that did is that had a trickle effect and an impact on our current year. We had reconciled several months, so I really do not understand how that was possible if June 2024 had discrepancy in it, but either way, we haven't been able to do the reconciliation because we'd be off, we have been off, and our numbers wouldn't align. So I don't have a treasurer's report. The information that was in the packet is the information that would be provided part of the treasurer's report. What it does is it gives you year-to-date relative to the budget and the expenditures, where we stand with just a couple of weeks left. We are pretty much close to having the end of the fiscal year be done, and so all of these departments are either nearly to 100% or, well above 50%, certainly, We have been making sure that any journal entries that have needed to be done are being done. The check reconciliation is being done. So there are aspects, many aspects of the bank reconciliation is being done to ensure that money is flowing properly and our bank account hasn't been completely wiped out and we're not aware of it. It's just that giving you that kind of summary with the final numbers is something that we're not able to provide until the fiscal year 24 audit is complete, which, speaking to them this week, they said that by the end of this week, they're going to be sending it to their financial department, which will be kind of compiling all the information in a draft document. So within the next 2 weeks, we should have something in our hands for that. Once that is done, then we will receive a journal entry that we will need to do for corrections for fiscal year 24, which will provide us with accurate numbers, which will then help us figure out the rest of the reconciliation. At that point, I'll provide you with more detail as far as where the year ended and so forth. But this document right here provides a pretty good snapshot of where we stand relative to revenue, expenses, and where the departments in general stand overall. Carol?
I just wanted to ask on, section 32, or whatever, Department 3200 solid waste.
Yep.
It looks like we've only paid a little over 3,000 on the chipping, brush chipping. And I remember you saying that
Yep.
the contractor submitted a bill, double what
Yep.
they estimated. I personally feel like we should pay him at least the fee that we agreed, what we thought we agreed to, which
Yep.
was 22,000.
We have the check issued, we've had it issued. He was out here a couple of weeks ago. I spoke to his daughter. She said he was gonna come into the office and talk to me. Being able to try to get a hold of him has been very difficult for me.
But do you feel like he is owed at least what we agreed?
Absolutely, and I'm happy to send the check that we've had issued. I just was trying to get a hold of him to have the conversation so he doesn't receive a check for half the price of what he billed us for, and then, but maybe that is what might lead him to actually pick up the call and reach out to me. So, but yeah, I can do that.
I think you can even say, it's a consensus of the board that, we wanted to pay him for what we felt we had agreed to, but if he wants to discuss, kind of his bill, or whatever, what he considers an outstanding balance, we're willing to do that. I just don't feel good about not paying him.
I can do that, and what I'll do is I've been communicating with his daughter. I'll send her an email so there is a paper trail to show that,
I just
expect.
I just feel like.
Yep,
there was
no,
issues
I'm
that
happy to do that.
We can discuss the balance.
Yep.
after that.
And that's what I have for the reports. And so you can move on to the next thing unless you have any questions.
All right, so as the vice chairman of the previous board, we will move on to the item number 4, the public hearing for the slow bell. So just like to mention too, I noticed that after our committee appointments, we bring up the liquor license. I would like to move forward on this so we don't keep you here forever. But I understand we need to appoint the new chair and vice chair official for this term. So as soon as we have this public hearing, we'll appoint chair and vice chair, and then we'll review your liquor license. Yeah, so this is the public. Any comments from the public? None. Any comments on the board? Pearl.
I don't have a comment, I said, but so we're having a public hearing specifically about the liquor license?
Correct.
And that's required in our?
Correct. Yeah, it's state/town requirement, so, it's something that with the liquor license, when the liquor license is up for renewal, the municipality has to have a public hearing, allowing the public to speak on their thoughts, whether they agree or disagree. When the public hearing closes, then the board goes into a decision to vote whether approve or not approve. Then the signature is needed from the individual by the board's approval before they can have the state approve it.
So given that, I guess the question I'll ask is, are you aware of any complaints about, operation of business in the prior year?
The town has not received any formal complaints, nope.
Understand. Well, if there's no further discussion, we'll close the public hearing. Oh, what, if you have one last word?
Do I go up there?
Yes, the X,
Oh.
the remaining X.
No, just to answer any questions you might have. I know, right there. The fire security system's been annual inspection, the sprinkler system annual inspection. The Ralph Monroe, the local inspection was completed. And all the, the extinguishers and everything else have all been, I've done it every year, have all been inspected and so forth. And the state fire marshal comes through in September, so that's on their schedule as far as that goes. So I mean, I get full inspection, so just so you know.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also, just so you know, I mean, I always talk to the county sheriff practically on a weekly basis on the weekends and everything else. So I'm constantly trying to get updates on if we get, where we are, how we're doing, and so forth. So just so you know.
Great, thank you. Alrighty. So we'll close that off. Now we'll move on to the regular business, which is appoint new select board members. So
So Carol White and Erhard Grutoff were voted in by the voters of Shebig to be the new select board members. And so there's an oath in front of you. If you each want to take a turn and read the oath, then you are officially appointed.
Okay, I'll start. I, Carol White, do swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, so long as I shall continue to be a citizen thereof. I, Carol White, do swear or affirm that I will faithfully discharge to the best of my abilities the duties incumbent on me as a select board member of the town of Shebig Island according to the Constitution and the laws of the state of Maine.
I, Erhard Grotoff, do swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, so long as I shall continue to be a citizen thereof. And I, Erhard Grotoff, do swear and affirm that I will faithfully discharge to the best of my abilities the duties incumbent upon me as a select board member of the town of Shebig Island according to the Constitution and laws of the state of Maine.
Congratulations. And I'll take those and then,
We have to sign, right?
yeah, can you sign right next to your typed name?
Here?
Yep. And then the clerk or deputy clerk will sign the other. Thank you.
All right, welcome aboard. Welcome back aboard. All right, moving on, let's appoint the chair and new vice chair of the select board. And,
I would be quite pleased, I'm quite pleased to nominate Carol to be the select chair.
I would second.
Any discussion?
So Eliza nominated Carol. Who seconded? Erhard or David? Okay. Okay.
And all,
Carol, I appreciate commitment to the town and your knowledge about things, and I really appreciate the chance to working with your leadership. So thank you. Are we ready?
All those in favor? Four, and
Yeah, I'm
one
abstaining.
abstain.
Feels weird to vote for.
So I think from here you can run the meeting.
Well, you
I'd
need
like to,
vice chair.
Oh, I do the vice chair also?
Well, it's part of the same agenda item.
Well, okay.
I'd like to nominate Eliza Jane as vice chair.
I second.
Discussion?
Any discussion? I've seen none. All those in favor? 4, and 1 abstain.
Who was this, who seconded it?
Richard.
Richard.
All right.
Okay, that's agenda 25-036.
Carol, the floor is yours.
So I think the next thing we wanted to move on to then is the, to approve the Slovell Cafe liquor license, is that right?
Yeah.
So I think we'd like to take agenda item 25-44 out of order and do that next. So, I guess, we had the public hearing, there was any public comment, so I guess, I'd like to have a motion on that. David?
I move we approve the Snowbell Cafe liquor license for the current year,
Is there a
current
second?
season.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Unanimous?
Yes.
Great.
I- One quick comment. So on the application, because it's very different, we can't figure out where the board needs to sign. Once we do, I'll get signatures from them and follow up with you.
I know,
It's very different and there is no page for all of their signatures, so
yeah, I can call.
I'll be in touch. Thank you.
All right, I think from there, so thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
And nice to have, you show up in person, I appreciate it.
We just started soft serve, and we hope to do lots of rolls.
You don't need a license for that.
That's important for the public to hear. Okay, we're gonna move down the agenda, so 25-37 to appoint 2 members of the select board to the joint standing committee adjournment. So this is the committee that meets periodically with the board of selectmen to really talk about the, over the hill agreement, basically the court order and how we are using the parking facility and the traffic down and back and forth to the north. And who were the members?
Bob and Carol.
And I literally have never attended a meeting, but, I think they met once just recently.
Yeah.
So,
So,
Yeah.
I nominate Eliza Jane to be one of the,
so is that the process? Do we have to go through and kind of do a motion on everybody, or do we do? sort of-
I would do a motion and nominate both people.
Yeah.
I would, if I were you, I would discuss it. It's just, so these used to historically be kind of, as the conversation came up, nominations took place, and it became really difficult for us to keep track of it. And so we're trying something new this year, where at the start of the fiscal year, we go through all of them. And then if you want to choose to have, Bob is the guy that was on a lot of these that needs to be replaced, but you guys could choose to still have the other person on it. But it just, for our record keeping, it just makes it easier to have it all at once, and I would just, have a discussion, pick who the 2 people you want to be, make a motion with both those names, and move on to the next one.
I'm just curious whether, although they're separate items, if there's room or, I don't know, the process, honestly, to discuss, like some of those might be naturally fit together and make more sense for somebody to be maybe on two of them that are somewhat related. You know, as opposed to just trying to pick people.
Yeah, well, so
For example, I was thinking, some of the CTC, you were on CTC and the Armas thing. Seems like a lot of the stuff that comes up has to do with all the CTC related transformation stuff, so.
Actually, I would say that it's more than just sort of CTC related stuff, and it's okay that you might be, when I look at the list, I don't think, you know, if somebody's on one, they should be on the other in some ways.
We do have a list of the people who were on the previous
Can you
committees.
go through that list so we
Yeah.
can take that into account?
So with the joint standing committee, we had Carol and Bob. CTC was Bob and Richard. The golf course was Bob and Richard. Jenks Road was Carol and Richard. JP Cog delegates, Bob was one of them, and Mark used to be the other one, and so we had not appointed the second one, so you need two for that. Stone Wharf was Carol and Bob. And then the Main Island Coalition, Bob was one, there was no second one, and Bev Johnson was the kind of the general public fill-in for that. She's been on it for years, so.
When I was on the island, I thought it was one member and an alternate. Is that not right?
Maybe I think you're right.
So I
Yep, so
think
she,
you designate somebody to be the member and somebody to be.
And
the
an alternate, yep.
They can't come.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be a select board member for either of those, but typically,
it seems to me that, the list is pretty good, and we replace those, the slots where Bob was not, unless somebody doesn't want to still be on that committee. So to me, it looks like with the Yarmouth committee that Eliza has expressed interest in doing.
Yep, I'd be interested, Carol, are you interested in being on the joint standing committee?
I think I'd be happy to have somebody else, I think that's, I think it would be good for somebody else potentially to be on that committee, if they're interested, if there's interest. I would do it, but if somebody is, if Richard or Earhart or David is interested, they are welcome to do that. It does not meet very frequently, but it is important to meet periodically. I'm trying to remember what was discussed the last time they met. Basically the major change we tried to make was putting Shabig in the driver's seat in terms of contracting on projects for the Cousins Island Wharf, because we pay the majority of the cost. And they were quite agreeable to that. So
Yep, the MOU was agreed upon and passed, so going forward, that is more or less the new process that will be followed. And so we had a remote discussion last time, and the goal is to meet in person. At this point, I think kind of waiting with the summer kicking off, it'd be very difficult to do so. So waiting a little bit to set up a meeting later in the season for an in-person visit, whether it's on Shabig or Yarmouth.
And then the other thing that came up was they have a committee, some kind of working committee on Wyman Station, they've been in discussions about potential uses of that property, recognizing that not all, they think a portion of it may eventually become available. They have not been talking to the property owners, so it's kind of amongst themselves, but they did invite Shabig to participate in that, so I would think theoretically somebody from the joint standing committee on Shabig's side would be that representative. So that could be an interesting thing to participate in, depending on what they need. I don't know too much about it.
Carol, I'd be glad to serve on that, but as a new member of the select board with just 1 year, I appreciated your work there as
Okay.
well.
All right, fine.
Unless anyone else is dying to do it, but I think that I would appreciate your background about the replacement work that needs to be done. And
And what I would suggest is, you know, maybe we go through the whole list so that we make decisions and then we can come back and go through them.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
So we
Can
don't
I-
start undoing, yep.
So, Mark, you probably were gonna say the same thing I'm gonna say now. Mark is on the Joint Standing Committee and the Jenks Road. He had offered to assist with his historical background and knowledge. And so the board did agree, the previous board, for him to be involved in that. And so, I guess that's a decision for you, if you want to just kind of continue letting that happen, or do you want to include him in that reappointment process? But just so you know, he is kind of the public at large on a couple of those projects and participates in that as well.
So we have 2 select board members and a member of the public at large?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Earhart, do you have a
No,
question?
that's good, that's.
Would you mind if I spoke really quickly on this?
Yeah, I'm running me, but I think we should.
Thank you.
Forgot.
I agree that I think if Carol is willing, her experience with us already and also her connection with Chris Mayo from DOT is going to be very important. Historically, the Joint Standing Committee, when it was between Cumberland and Yarmouth, was basically focused on the wharf agreement, the wharf itself, the landing, and the area with the bus. I think now, I'm not saying we should change any charge of this committee, not necessarily, but it looks to me like it's gonna have to blend into bigger discussions about Blanchard's parking lot and any improvements or not. So, I'm very willing to participate if the board would like me to continue.
And I think it would be, personally, it would be good if Mark continued on that, since he has the historical knowledge, for example, of what the purpose of the committee is. There is an actual charge for the committee. So, I think, I would still suggest we move through these and then do motions at the end, just in case I don't wanna keep undoing. So on 25038, 2 members of the select board to the CCC committee. I was on that committee, I think the first year I was on the board, with Bob, and then with Mark. Mark and I were the 2 people initially, then Bob, and I don't know how it evolved, but ultimately, I think Bob replaced Mark, and then Richard joined the committee in my spot. So right now, the last configuration was Bob Ernest and Richard, and so we need at least, are you interested in staying?
Yeah.
Okay, so we need another person who would be interested in being on that committee.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
Yeah, I think that's,
I'm curious, so what is the interface between that committee and CTC, and like what sort of frequency do you go there? Every one of their meetings, or they only go on for specific issues? How does it-
specific issues, and as far as I see it, there's an important sort of toehold in there, because we're talking about the way the CPC interfaces with the town, and then also the way our town interfaces with Yarmouth. We're all part of the same suit. But that's mostly where I think a lot of the discussion goes, how we can help interface with Yarmouth.
And this,
And money.
and initially, this was a request of CTC. When you and I got asked to be on this committee, CTC asked that we meet periodically. I would say on the average of like quarterly.
I think I've been there twice, so.
So something like quarterly.
Who initiates the meeting? I know it could be either way, but is there?
Could be either way, yeah. It's just like it came up for Varging about a month ago, so Bob and I went and talked about Varging.
It's a little loose, and it might benefit from at least having an agenda for the meeting so that everybody knows what's being discussed.
Yes.
And I think it's sort of been, CPC has been driving it, but I do think it sort of seems to be, continuing, so. All right.
Can
so
I,
think for that one, we're looking at Earhart and Richard.
Can I just make one suggestion? So I typically am involved in the process with a lot of these side committees as far as coordination and things like that. And the CTC committee is one that I've managed to kind of get slipped out of. And so if you do coordinate any of those meetings for whoever those two board members, I just ask that you please include me on the conversations. That would be
I
great.
think that would have been good for some.
It might help logistically wise, just
Yeah, and
being
I-
able to be part of the process.
And I think as a board member, it would be good to know what's going to be discussed ahead of time, so that if we have input, we can provide it, because I generally don't have any idea what's being talked about, so.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just something we could bring to the process.
Excuse me, Caroline, you're saying that when there's a meeting of the CTC committee, that all select board members would receive notice of the agenda, or
Yeah,
just?
no, yeah, I think it would be important for the whole board to know what topics are gonna be discussed. It could just be an email saying, these are the three things we're talking about. You know, is there any concerns that you have, because those two people are representing the board.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, I'd appreciate
Yeah,
it.
and that would also maybe structure the meetings a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's.
I do think there are some potential topics that could be discussed, so, you mentioned one today. So, all right, so I think we're moving on to the golf course committee, so this was, most recently it was Bob and Richard. I think there was, there's an MOU that I guess was signed, that's
Yep.
basically an agreement that we would work with the golf course in the event that, so it's not an actual agreement about the golf course property, but rather an agreement that we would work together relative to the property, you know, that's being considered on the other side of, the home lawn property. And so I think that's really that in the event that we were gonna pursue acquisition of that property, this committee would be sort of, in a sense, the committee, the negotiating committee on that. And I would say this is sort of on hold beyond the MOU at the moment. So I don't know if there'd be a lot of activity, but it could be, you know, it could be important. So Richard, are you interested in staying on that?
I am, and when I was on it with Bob, I saw Bob being an important cog, because he was also on the stone work committee. So I'd like to see the idea of having sort of an interdigitated grouping. So if I'm on the golf course, I think Eliza Dane is interested in being on the stone work committee, but then you could be on the golf course to interface that. So.
Yes and no, I think that, making sure we have multiple legs under the table is important as well. So I think I'd leave that open to discussion if somebody else wants to do it. I think, as long as we're doing a good job of communicating about what's going on,
Yes.
it isn't up to the two people are representing the select board and the town, so I think that could be shared. Does anyone else want to do it other than, Carol, you were on it before?
Yeah, it's not one on, you know, I don't wanna add more things to my plate, so I also would say that I consider these basically subcommittees of the select board. That's really what they are, they're not committees per se, but subcommittees. And the reason we go with two people is so we don't have to notice the meeting, it's just a practical reason. But, so if David or Earhart, if you're interested, speak up, otherwise Eliza Jane would do it, it sounds like.
I would, but Earhart, David, you want to do it?
I'm just curious what we were thinking about stone work, as you know, I'm really interested in that, so.
We're all gonna pull in that hole.
Yeah, we're all being.
Yeah, actually. So,
Okay.
well, I mean, we can decide that's how we're gonna operate.
Yeah.
So the golf course committee, is that Eliza Jane, if I got that right?
No, there's a couple of others I want to do, so
Yeah, so let's,
leave me out.
yeah,
All right,
do
let's
that
come back to
let's
that.
come back to it.
All right, so the next one is a subcommittee from the select board for Jenks Road. So this is primarily been related to moving, we were approached by the property owners with, you know, concerns or interest in working with the town to protect the dunes and, potentially relocate the parking. It turned into a completely different project by the time we, after the storms and where we are now. So we are actually relocating the parking. And Mark is sort of he's a public at-large person on the committee, and so that's with the neighbors in the area. And this might be a relatively short-term committee in that we are, we have a tentative design here, but there are probably parts of the dune restoration that might take a little bit more time. So it was Richard and myself. I'm happy to continue, but if somebody's really interested in getting on, I'm also fine to sort of step aside if somebody wants to. So Richard, do you want to continue?
Yeah,
So Richard wants to
good on that.
continue, and he lives down in the area, so that kind of makes sense. But if somebody's interested, and I guess when I looked at this, the other thing that popped into my mind is the hook parking situation there's really no committee, no group that's working on that. Did we want to wrap that into this potentially?
You can. Where that stands is GEI is coming up with kind of the creation of the process, and then they're going to present it to the town. The town will authorize it or not, and then it goes to planning board.
Right, and
So-
I would personally recommend that both the Hook project and the Jenks Road project maybe be
Same
kind
people?
of covered with this subcommittee, just so that it's got a select board member kind of aware of what's happening on
Yeah,
that.
and that would
because-
definitely be, we should have planned on this across the street, so.
Yeah, so why don't, so if Earhart and Richard want to do that, I think it would be good. These are not committees that are going to last for years. They're hopefully,
Yeah, sure.
they'll be one and done.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a good combo.
And do we have a timeline right now on that information from GEI for the hook?
So the goal is to have Jenks Road and the Hook Road in front of the planning board in July. And so GEI is aware of that timeline, and that's what they're working towards. And so we hope to have both of those to be able to hopefully get passed by the planning board so we can proceed with construction.
Great, so there you go, Richard and
But I think,
Mark.
I think there could be some ancillary issues about signage and enforcement that it would be helpful to have the committee follow. So that looks good. All right, moving on to the GP cog delegates. So I don't know, the GP cog delegate,
So GP cog is the Greater Portland Government of Commerce, which we're a part of. They have a lot of great services that they offer. The only time in my experience where the JP cog delegates were requested is they do an annual summit. Eliza recently went, maybe she could speak to it, and they've really asked, because the delegates and the municipalities and these members are ultimately the ones who vote on a lot of the decisions, and so they need representations from all the different communities to make it possible. And so we need to have 2 delegates and an alternate if needed. And so I've in the past either been a delegate or an alternate. I would prefer to be an alternate, but if we're struggling to have 2 board members, then I'm happy to be it. But Eliza just recently wed, so she could speak to it a little bit.
I think they're a gold mine of support for some of the things we're doing. First off, that's where Ellie Hughes is coming from, and I think we look at the quality of work that's coming out of that connection with that program. So strong. I did go to the annual event, and that was very helpful to listen to. Christina did our retreat last year. I thought she did a great job. As a member of the GP COG organization, we get 1 day a year with her, so I thought that was good. And I'm also going to say Paul Johnson, the Director of Economic Development, is lending some support to the housing efforts of the ad hoc Street Housing Committee. So I just want to say, I'd like to be on that committee.
Okay, so Eliza Jane has, and so there are regional planning commissions, so they have, I don't know, 20-member towns or something from
Yeah.
Portland all the way down to Little Long Island, which is big. You pay dues based on your population, so you don't pay very much dues, and to be frank, historically, we haven't had much services from them because we're kind of like the smallest payer. I think that sort of changed a little bit. I do think, what's her name, the director?
Christina?
Christina has sort of been more, she's done more outreach to the smaller communities, so I do think it's been better. They can help us with various projects, and they have a certain allocation of time for each community. Ours is less than, say, Portland, obviously, because of our size, but, they do a lot of transportation planning and stuff, and Bob sort of attended some of that. I'm kind of out of that loop, but I do think the AmeriCorps program has been a huge benefit to Shabagan, if nothing else, I mean, that's huge. So it's our local regional planning commission, so we do kind of want to have a connection to them. I think, so Eliza Jane, and is there anybody else who's interested in that in terms of being, so the delegate would have to attend, would be, encouraged to attend the annual summit, which was in May this year, right?
It's, the last number of years, it's been at the same location, which has been at,
St.
yes, yep. So,
So anybody else interested in that?
Come on, there, it's good, there it is. Okay.
Some of them, I mean, I'm curious about.
I'll just keep you posted, and I think that,
Well, I think we have room for two, so,
for example, there's a bus, the Breeze bus, that goes up the Route 1 corridor, and it stops at the park and ride in Yarmouth. It should be available to stop at the CTC parking lot, for people who want to go to the mainland and don't have a car, and they could go to Yarmouth or Falmouth by taking the Breeze bus. So there's one of the AmeriCorps persons is working on that, and I have a little chat with them at the annual event, and I was like, so why doesn't this bus stop at our Route 1 parking lot? I could just see if there's anybody there, and that's a doable thing, but it's gonna take some information to that organization, and we're gonna have to do some asking of people here on the island if they would ever use that service. Perhaps it could be seasonal. So again, this is a resource that we could work on with GP Club.
so I've got you, Eliza Jane, I didn't hear, is anybody else interested?
I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a good, if you don't know anything
Good
about
orientation.
GP it's good to listen, to hear about that. It's not a huge time commitment.
No.
no,
And then, would you be willing to stay as the alternate speaker?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, now the Stone Wharf Committee, I think everybody's interested in the Stone Wharf Committee, and I get it, because it's the big project and there's kind of a lot happening right now, so, I think the purpose of this subcommittee was so that we could meet periodically with the consultant, the engineering firm, to, kind of go over the status of the projects and to, get an update, because it kind of requires that to keep them moving on the project. I think if we feel we wanna only meet with them as a board, that we can decide that as a board. If you don't want a subcommittee, it's not as agile as a subcommittee that can meet kind of on short notice, because this would, if we meet only as a board, then we have to notice the meetings, and, it might be a little more challenging to, schedule, so I guess that's open for discussion.
I just have a question, just so, let's say we just have two representatives going to that, and obviously you want to get that information back to the board as timely as possible, have discussions. What are the restrictions we have about talking about these things when we're not actually having an official public meeting?
So you mean as a board?
As members of the board who are all interested in that project.
So we can talk to other board one board member can talk to another board member ad nauseam, there's no restrictions. we can even, but once you get into a third board member and it's a meeting, then it has to be noticed, is that right? So it's really, all of us can communicate individually with other board members without any real restrictions. It's once we add another person to that process, it becomes a potential, because we have a, you know, majority of the board, and that becomes a problem.
What about email updates, like you two members go to the, have, you know, meet and whatever, and wanna give the feedback to the rest of the board, does that count as a meeting? Or?
Not to me, I mean, I think that would be a good practice, is that if people are working on these subcommittees, they can provide updates. For example, what we did most recently on the Stormwater Subcommittee was we had some discussions about the design guidelines, and we put those in writing as a memo to the consultant, and that's partly so that if the board changes significantly in the past 2 years, somebody has a record of what we said to the consultant using our design guidelines. So that's kind of how, you know, so I do think it's good to memorialize those meetings, particularly the Stonewall, and it could be done with a memo to the board, here's what we discussed. But I would say we haven't really followed that practice very rigorously.
If I could add to your comment, certainly email is permissible. However, a conversation by email would not be. In other words, you can send out the email saying that we met and here's what we talked about, and do not reply.
You can reply to one person.
Well, you really don't want to have a conversation or deliberate by email, but you can certainly inform by email. And so we haven't been as structured to kind of, you know, write updates, but maybe all of these committees should really provide them once they meet. Because it's, I don't know, Herb and Mark sitting in the audience as former select board members, what have you guys done in the past?
I think you're absolutely right. I think an email following a meeting of a subcommittee of the board, just informing the board and the town administrator, if the town administrator wasn't present at the meeting, well, the town administrator could send out the summary of the discussion, is fine. Like David said, then you don't want to get into asking email questions followed on. That's just a summary report. I think the attorney will be able to help you with that proper process of what's expected as a council, or in this case, a select board too.
And was that a general practice for you guys?
Yeah, everybody did it a little differently. I almost always, if I did something outside of the board of selectmen, I wrote it in the form of a memo to the entire board from me. And tried to memorialize it that way, and tried to formalize it that way. The whole email question is a question of deliberation and carrying out town business. Those two things need to be done in public. Transfer of information is not part of that.
But by the same token, if we send out an email to the board with a summary of the meeting, that's public information. So it doesn't mean we have to distribute it to the public, but it's in public.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's all discoverable, yeah.
So anyway, I think if we follow that practice, I think I'd be interested in Vika's take on the, you know, having a subcommittee for the stone wall versus not having one, because I think everybody's it sounded like people are very interested in the stone wall committee. What's your advice on that based on your experience?
I think the last couple of years, having a subcommittee on the stone wharf has been really helpful for kind of the day in and day out tasks. At the end of the day, no decision could be made in terms of moving forward or accepting a contract or proceeding with certain work unless it is discussed and voted on by the entire board. But I personally do think there is value to having a couple of board members representing that and then bringing that information to the board. But that's for you to decide as a board.
So, yep.
This is our big lift. This is the big lift that's ahead of us as a select board. It's been so asked for by the public, and I think we're really at a historic time potentially with the work that GEI is doing and what we hope to be able to do. So I like the idea of being nimble, because that means that nimbleness allows meetings to happen, but also all of us making the commitment that I think we've heard again and again to inform each other and to involve everybody. So I want to say I like the idea of having two people, but I'm clearly interested in being on this committee. But I'm not saying that to the exclusion of everyone, but really the importance of being efficient in getting things done, but also it makes it more important to inform all of us, because all of us want to work on this, and it's a big lift.
David?
Yeah, the point, I think, is that if there's a meeting coming up that should be of importance or of relevance to the entire board, all we have to do is notice it and put it out there, and then we'll go if we so choose. That's not necessarily the case for each and every meeting, but certainly we have the ability to do that if we've got something of pressing importance on it.
I mentioned it just sort of as a joke, we should all be on it, because it's so important. And I do recognize the idea to have two people be able to go at it. And I think, Carol, you have a strong historical knowledge of that beyond any of us here. And,
Yeah, so most recently it was Bob and myself, and frankly, one of the reasons I'm even sitting here tonight is kind of for some continuity. So I would be, and plus it's kind of more in my wheelhouse, the engineering side of things. So I would be happy to stay on that committee. I think we do need another person, and, you know, I'll leave it to you guys to decide who feels they would like to do it. And I haven't really got a good handle on kind of distribution, people here.
I would support Eliza being it. I mean, I think we also want to be on it, but I think she has some enthusiasm and some, peripheral historical knowledge. having been on the board.
Just curious,
Yeah, I mean,
does the Stonewall project include the parking issues
yeah.
up the road?
The
Okay, so it's the
whole
whole.
Yeah, the whole thing.
bargaining, cousins on.
It did.
I will say, I think, we've made progress on a number of projects with the current consultant. I will say the Stone Pier is not moving so fast, and I think we're waiting on a survey, for example, so, we probably do kind of need to get on the stick. We have not been very, consistent about summarizing kind of the outcomes of these meetings, so I think that would be an important upgrade from how we've been operating. So is there a consensus? It sounds like Gerhard and Eliza Jane are both interested.
I'll do it.
Fine.
Okay.
Fair.
We'll let Eliza Jane do it this year. I'm happy to pass the baton after that.
It's on autopilot.
Yeah, well, never will be on autopilot. And I will, just to set people's expectations, I believe, we submitted an application to, Senator Pingree, Congresswoman Pingree office and Senator Collins. And we had probably the best cost estimate that we've ever had, which was about $7 million without the golf course parking. So that just included upgrades to Wharf Road, not really much of an increase in the footprint at all of the stone wharf, and it's, to some people, it might not look like a lot of changes, and that was $7 million. And the timeline for that was fall of '27. So people know kind of what we're talking about for a timeframe. It is possible that we could upgrade Wharf Road prior to that, but that also has to be done at a certain time of the year. So anyway, just letting you know that's kind of the timeframe. Okay, but I would say we have some other pretty critical projects. I would actually say the most critical project at the moment, both time-wise and even functionally, is the Venice Cove Barge project. And we don't really have a subcommittee for that because it's kind of moving on a different track, but I think we'll get an update from GEI, next week when they're out. So. All right, and then the last one is the Main Islands Coalition, so this is a group that meets monthly? I can't remember, it's been going for a long time at the Island Institute, and it's the other islands, and they've also expanded it now to incorporate like Peaks Island and some of the islands that historically don't participate. When we were seceding, they were very helpful and supportive of that process, but they tackle housing issues, they tackle education issues. So it's basically mostly supposed to be driven by the islands themselves, and it's kind of this collective of island entities represented mostly by the municipalities, but also some other types of people attend. But it's really to kind of bring issues up front that that a lot of the islands share, and also to sometimes, then pursue legislative action as a group in case there's an issue that everybody shares that like working waterfront. They passed new legislation on working waterfront that grew in part out of the Islands Coalition. Housing issues, quite a bit. That's the main state housing program for islands, came out of the Islands Coalition. So it can be interesting. So right now, it was Bob and Bev was the alternate. So I think, is there any interest in being on? And that committee used to meet in person, but now it pretty much meets virtually, which makes it logistically a lot easier. So any interest in that committee?
That'd be interesting.
Okay. And I would say, I think anybody can go. You can be a designate, but you can attend. So David, you're interested in that?
I'm interested in that, and hope somebody else will join me.
Okay. Do I have an interest in a alternate?
I would be interested in being an alternate. I have attended some that pertains to housing and found it very useful. So I would be glad to be your alternate.
Alternate, sure. Takes two.
All right, so
Want to go back through and
I'm
just-
gonna go back through, but I guess we should do separate motions for each of these, or can we do it?
So you still have golf course
Oh,
to
no,
discuss?
Richard and who else?
Earhart,
I had CTC committee was Richard and
It's just
Earhart.
Richard right
Yeah.
now.
For golf course, you guys said you'd
You're right.
revisit it.
You're right. Oh, you're right, because there was some confusion, so.
Yeah.
The golf course committee was Bob and Richard, now it's Richard, and I will say, I don't think it's gonna be a super active committee over the next
most
6
of the
months.
heavy lifting.
You have a question, Mr. Maine?
Thank you for recognizing that. Literally. Just, your point about these being subcommittees is important, because to form one of these committees or to make it, to change its focus or change anything about it is literally an agreement between you guys, so it's very, very. So if a lot of people are interested in doing various aspects of the Stone Wharf project, you could have more than one, big, beautiful Stone Wharf committee. This parking committee, this golf course committee could sort of morph into like someone to interface with the engineers, or one of the groups could be interfacing with the engineers, one of the groups could be looking at parking, one of the groups could be looking at parking, financing, money. So my point is that it doesn't have to be just one group that focuses on that if you're organized.
I would agree, I think we're not at a point on the Stone Wharf where we want to bifurcate into multiple committees yet, because I think, there is sort of the divide and conquer thing, but I do think right now, it took a while to get us on a track where I think the consultant understands the town's needs and kind of limits. And I would say the prior consultant never did. So, I think we should stay on the track we are and keep it kind of constrained until we get a little further down the track. For example, if we make a decision that we do want to deal with Wharf Road and widening Wharf Road and paving it, I would be totally inclined to kind of create a subcommittee to deal with that. So I think that would, and that is likely the next step, and that could happen, at least in terms of moving forward on that sooner rather than later, so I appreciate.
I'll sign up for that when it comes.
Okay, so the golf course, I mean, the golf course committee, I guess the question for Richard is, do we need a committee for this year? Do we wanna?
Yeah.
I even
Well, yeah, we
question,
should keep it, just to keep it.
well, I mean, the goal, you did
Is that the MOU?
MOU,
Yeah.
so to me, I don't know what else.
The next step would be to take that information to town meeting.
Right.
So, and that's really a decision, I think, that's a good point, that's a decision, a lot of that is gonna be decision for the whole board to decide. The purpose of the MOU was, one, because, it was helpful information for, for us through the process of what's happening with GEI and even submitting the applications for funding. But then, two, it was too late in the process to bring anything forth to town meeting. And so this more or less allowed to have a formal document that could have been presented to the areas that were needed. The next step is to start the documentation and the process, which the entire board would have to be involved in, that you would then collectively bring to town meeting for the voters to decide, do they want to take, do they want to take on that land as town ownership and go through that land acquisition process.
I have an idea, Erica. You and I have spoken about increased communications.
Yeah.
And what if, could you consider taking the role of communicating to the community about updates on work at the stone pier?
Yeah, I think we have to talk about like what that process would look like, and that I can do that, be steps along the way, make sure that we're not saying one thing and, maybe not agreeing, but I'm absolutely involved in the involved communication.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
A lot of the frustration I hear from
Yeah, no, it's clear.
fellow islanders is.
And granted, a lot of people don't take the opportunities they have, but I think there's more room for opportunity to,
Yeah.
I mean, just even really short,
Yeah.
short blurbs on a regular basis, so people are actually looking for it.
Yeah.
Be really helpful.
So I think that's something we can talk about. I wanted to kind of first get through these subcommittees. I guess one question I have is on the golf course committee. Personally, I would sort of suspend that committee for the time being, and we could reconvene it if we feel the need, but I don't see that we need it at the moment.
As long as we have it right back off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there is other than we got the MOU and we're just waiting for.
Right, and it wasn't a
For it to
committee,
happen.
it became a committee to kind of do that negotiation. We're kind of done with that, and I would say, let's just leave it. I mean, Richard, you're on it, and we would just add another member if it needs to reconvene.
Okay.
All right,
If-
so,
If there is any communication from the golf course with the town relative to any of that, I will bring that information to you, and at that point, you can make those decisions. But for the time being, it sounds like for that agenda item, you will not make any action.
right. So starting from the top, I'm already up there blank here. So to appoint two members of the select board to the joint standing committee with Yarmouth.
Those, you
Eliza Jane, so Carol and Eliza Jane is
and
a
then
proposal.
Mark was,
And Mark is a public at large, so can I have a motion to that effect?
Can I make a motion?
I,
Should we do a motion for all of them? Can we group them?
what I would recommend is if you agree that it's gonna be Carol and Eliza, that somebody else make a motion,
Yeah, thank you.
so you're not motioning yourself.
I'll make a motion 25037 to appoint Carol and Eliza to the joint standing committee of Yarmouth.
And just a question, Rika, is that through this fiscal year, is that the idea?
Yes.
So,
Any discussion? All in favor? 2538, to appoint 2 members of the select board to the CTC committee. We agreed upon Richard and Earhart. So can I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion, I'm gonna make a motion that 25-038, to appoint 2 members of the select board to the CTC committee be Richard and Earhart.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 2539, to appoint 2 members of the select board to the golf course committee. We've decided to not take any action on that item. 2540, to appoint 2 members of the select board to the Jenks Road, and I would say, I think we agreed to extend that to the Hook committee, and I think we agreed for Carol and Richard.
Richard and Earhart.
Oh, sorry, Earhart, see, there you go. Okay, so can I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion that on 25-040, to appoint 2 members of the select board to the Jenks Road committee, also to include the Hook for Earhart and Richard.
Second.
Second.
Any discussions? All in favor? Next one is to appoint 2 members of the select board as VP COG delegates, and I think we agreed, if I've got it right this time, Eliza Jane and Earhart.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 25-041, to appoint Eliza and Earhart to the select board members of VPCOG.
Second? David, second, any discussion? All in favor? 3. 2542, to appoint 2 members of the select board to the Stone Wharf committee, and I think we ended up with Eliza Jane and Carol, and,
I'll make a motion for 25-042 to appoint Carol and Liza as the select board to the Stone Wall Committee.
second? Is that David?
David?
Any discussion? All in favor? And then 2542, and it would be to appoint 1 member of the select board to the Maine Islands Coalition and 1 alternate. And I believe we have David as the member and Eliza Jane as the alternate.
I'd like to make a motion to approve 25-043, to appoint Eliza and David as select board members on the Maine Island Coalition.
Second?
Let's do that.
Oh, second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
And
Okay, got it. And I think we already did agenda item 2544, so we're down to 25.
We didn't really approve the snowmobile license, we just talked about.
I think we moved it up.
You moved,
Made a
yeah,
motion.
did we not?
no, you moved it, David made a motion to approve the liquor license, seconded by Earhart,
We moved it up to the front.
Oh, okay.
and everybody, yep.
Yep, thanks for, you could have missed it. 2545, to review and authorize the town administrator to sign the communication services agreement between Cumberland County and the town. There was a copy of that agreement in the packet, and I guess we can open it up to discussion and see if anybody has any questions. Vika, is there anything you want to say?
So this is an agreement that has historically been approved every 3 years. This year, when I received the agreement, it had dollar numbers in it for the next 3 years. The board cannot authorize or approve expenditures of any dollars for future fiscal years. So I had to do some back and forth with the town attorney to try to clear up the language and then kind of renegotiate the contract so they can either remove those dollar values out of it or do it for a year. And so they went ahead and did it for a year, and understanding that we will, the next round, probably approve it for 2 years, so then we can be covered for the 3 years like it historically has been. It has been reviewed by the town attorney. There are no concerns or issues, and it is something that has historically been approved without any issues in the past.
Very good. So the question is, the cost, was the annual cost, something we've already been paying, maybe not the exact same cost, but.
It goes up slightly every year. Historically, the cost was not laid out to the dollar in the contract. It's something that we found out from them on an annual basis. It is a number that is budgeted within the fire department contracted services. It's just that this year, for fiscal year 25, 26, 27, they've come up with what they're gonna charge municipalities and have let the municipalities know, so we know the number going forward for the next 3 years. But we weren't in a position where we could have this board authorize and sign a contract with somebody saying that you're agreeing to pay this exact number in fiscal year 27,
Right.
which is why it got changed,
Their
but,
budget's only for this.
correct. Yeah.
Okay,
And am I correct, it's based on the population, so we're paying $8.78 per resident?
And that's how are able to predict future
Thank you.
or anticipate, basically.
so does anybody, are there any more questions for Rita about that? Otherwise, does anybody have an interest in making a motion on that?
I move that we authorize the town administrator to sign the communication services agreement between Cumberland County and the town.
Second? Okay, so, any discussion on 2545, communication services agreement? Mark?
Just a question on how much is it?
$2,600, $2,900.
So should,
Around
should that
3,000.
be included in the motion? Probably, right? That's, right?
No, because the dollar number is, I mean, you can if you want to, but the dollar number is in here, so if you're making a motion to authorize me to sign it, you're making a motion to approve this contract as written.
I can just add as specified in the agreement.
Okay. Any more discussion about that? All in favor? Okay. Moving on to 2546. That's to review and authorize the town administrator to sign the engagement letter for fiscal year 25 audit with RHR Smith and Company CPAs. There were two proposals, or engagement letters for RHR. This is the one for fiscal year 25 for 22,000, I think, is that right? Total amount of the audit. So I think we could start out and see if anybody has any questions for Rita about that engagement letter.
So I did reach out to the town attorney to ask, and that's what, I apologize for looking at my phone. I was bringing up the email from him in case if I needed to read, just in terms of whether we are able to request a specific date. So there is a promised expectation of having things be completed by a certain time. And his response was that, well, it doesn't include to be completed. RHS does promise that they will issue written reports upon completion of their audit. And so the town attorney basically said that at any point, the town agrees on an annual basis, so it's not, you're committing to every future, and having a specific date is something that would be very difficult to request and put in. The option that the town can choose is to not move forward with the firm the next year, if they're not happy with 1 year, with the recommendation of being very careful that if that's decision that you choose to do, have an audit firm lined up before you refuse to or choose not to sign for the next fiscal year. There have been some hiccups for this particular fiscal year 24. I'm more hopeful than I've been through this process that we should have something within the next couple of weeks. I had a pretty lengthy conversation with them last week, the beginning of this week, or this morning. Within the last couple of days, I had a very lengthy conversation with them, and just kind of went through, there was a lot of inconsistencies about whether they had information, whether they didn't, whether they needed it, whether they didn't. So I really took the time and went through all the bullet points of things that they still had in question for us. And so the woman that I've been working with has been very wonderful to work with. I think there's been a lot of major changes with the firm from above the people that we're working with, so they've had a lot of challenges. What they're doing this year is something very new, where they are requesting the municipalities to sign the engagement letters within a certain time frame. And I did communicate with them about this, because within this engagement letter, it's also asking for 50% down of the payment, while also increasing the cost from previous years, which is no surprise there, but I think a little frustrating to say the least. We don't have the authority to pay for a future fiscal year out of a current fiscal year for auditing purposes, and so they had provided us with steps on how we can still do that, so then we're in compliance with the auditing process, and so unfortunately for us to still maintain on their list of clients, we have to have this engagement letter signed and a payment sent before July 1st, which is why it is in front of you tonight.
May I ask, are you comfortable with this arrangement personally?
So I'm very discouraged with how the process was for fiscal year 24. I think my probably knee replacement recovery did not help the situation. I am, with the conversations of the couple of individuals that I've dealt with, I am hopeful that with this process, and I think I've stressed a lot of frustration to that particular individual that I've worked with, that we are gonna, I would like to give it a try to see how this new system can play out. If it's as rocky as the fiscal year 24, I would absolutely be coming to the board with the recommendation that it not proceed beyond that year. But where we are now with not having an auditors lined up and them having this new system in place, we're working with a different individual within their audit who has very thorough knowledge of the TRIO system. And so they're helping us try to kind of set up some of our accounts so they're in line with what the audit firms in general need. And so I'm hopeful, and I would like to see it through for the next year, but that's for you as a board to decide.
So am I correct in saying that it took us a long time to get the 2023 audit?
No, 2023 audit was complete, and we had it prior to last year's town meeting. 2021 and 2022, it took a while because we were 2.5 years behind in the audit process when I stepped in as the town administrator. And so it took them a while. 2023 was on time. 2024 has not been.
So we still don't have the 2024 audit, but they're proposing that we enter into an agreement and pay half up front for the 2025 audit. Is that right?
That is correct, and in my conversation with the individual that I've dealt with, I have stressed it that if this is what we are agreeing, I expect that as of July 1st, we start the audit process for fiscal year '25 versus delaying it, because there's no reason, if we're committing to this, then we're committing to them starting the process right away, which is July 1. They can start fiscal year 2025.
So I looked on the state auditor's site, and I will say this firm seems to be late on a number of audits. If they're still working for the same towns, it's hard to know. But I guess I just want to express, I am a little reluctant to enter into a contract, particularly this 50% upfront is a new thing, right? So it's 50% upfront when we haven't even received the work product that we expected. And it did impact us negatively because we didn't know the undesignated fund balance for town meeting. And I don't know where, it sounded like you were saying tonight that some of that may be on the town side and not on the auditor's side. But I think we were getting regular updates that, it was coming soon, but nevertheless, we got all the way through town meeting and we still don't have it. I guess, and I did check in with the finance committee, and they sort of universally, they felt we should have a date that they, in the contract, that they would commit to providing the audit by. They feel strongly about that, and then they also suggested, and I kind of like this idea, is meeting with the firm, at least before we sign the engagement letter, and understanding, kind of having a frank discussion about why is this process been so difficult, and what's going to be different in the future as a board, not necessarily just talking with you. Because I feel a responsibility to the community, and I'm pretty reluctant to enter into this contract without a little bit more of a commitment, even if it's a verbal, personal commitment by the audit company. And I would invite the finance committee to maybe join that discussion, because I think they have sort of an interest in that too. So that's kind of my thinking. I get that they're supposedly, if we don't sign this by the end of this week, we're dead. But I think that's kind of, I'm not sure I want to work with a firm that kind of operates that way, because, this is if I was in their shoes and I still hadn't provided the work product for the previous year, I don't think I'd be demanding that we sign an agreement prior to providing that work product. So that's how I think about it. But I'd be curious how the rest of the board feels.
I'm kind of in agreement with you. Really, the condition should be, the amount they're asking us to pay them up front should be contingent upon them delivering what they already owe us. So it puts a little fire under their tail end to actually get that work done, so we can begin doing the new work. I agree with Carol. I think it just doesn't seem right.
I'm in agreement that there's a problem here, but I defer to Vika's judgment on this, because she's the one who really has to make it work. And if she feels it's gonna harm us really, by not agreeing, as I say, I'll leave it to Vika's judgment.
Eliza?
I agree that there should be some dates for deliverables in the contract, so we can have some more accountability with this organization. It's so important to have it on time. But Vika, I am encouraged if you're saying that the person you're working with now, you feel like that's a good working relationship. So I guess I'm agreeing with David in that I would defer to your judgment for how you feel this is sound right now, but we need to have some more accountability to have the deliverables when we need them. And would they be willing to meet with us, do you think?
So, yeah, I know we've requested it and tried to do it, before, and they were willing to meet with us. It's, I think there's so who was gonna meet with us was gonna be the two women that are currently really the audit managers for the municipality. I think they're limited to the agreements and the negotiations. They're going through the process of collecting the information and working with the town. I think it would be reaching out to to Ron, the president, or whatever his official role is now. I think one of the issues that haven't seen from the process of how, when this firm took Shebig on as a municipality for an audit, it was at a time when a lot of municipalities, small municipalities, were being disregarded because it was more bang for your buck. You could go by going to larger municipalities, and so small municipalities like Shebig, $10,000-15,000 for them is nothing, when then they can make significant. And so that left a lot of small towns without auditors. This firm, I think, took full advantage of that, I think, to a point where it was more than they could handle, so it's forced them to kind of revisit a lot of these. One of the comments, and this was really for me to provide the recommendation that I am to you, for you to make the decision that you choose, is the town attorney saying you can provide any stipulations. Don't be surprised if the firm just says, we're not gonna sign this, and potentially putting us in a position where we're scrambling to try to find another one. And so I don't have a good sense of what is available out there right now for firms, and so that's my hesitation and reservation there.
Eric?
Can we not get a firm date on completing the 2024 from them? I mean,
So
they're not willing to
when I spoke with her, she said that the information that she has this week is the week that Shebig is, she's prioritizing and finishing Shebig, and at the end of this week, she should have enough information to be able to send it to their finance division, where they compile everything into a draft.
So how long does it take after that, that process?
So my understanding is within the next 2 weeks or so, we should have a draft. That they typically send you a draft that we look at and review, and then the final thing. So within the next couple of weeks, and they've said within the next couple of weeks, a long time. The conversation that I had with her this week was, just felt different to me in terms of a conversation and completion.
I'm just wondering if it's possible to do a side letter or an addendum that we sign this and we're agreeing to pay us upfront, subject to.
I've asked several times for a date, and they're very reluctant. They always say, we can't really provide you, it's based on whether that's kind of the common answer that I've received.
So before, I guess, Richard, we'd like to hear your thoughts on it, and then we could ask the public if they have any comments.
So it sounds, maybe you've answered this, but it sounds like they want this initial payment by a certain date, and that date could be the day they deliver last year's report.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying,
That's
a side agreement or addendum, whatever.
But that's not.
It's
what-
two different contracts, though.
Right.
That's the thing, and that's where the town attorney, it's, what you're agreeing to now is the fiscal year 2025 audit.
Right.
That has very little stipulation to 2020. It's two different.
And just to
Years.
clarify, I think what I'm remembering was an issue with the prior year's audit. Didn't they discover a problem with the prior year's audit that was already completed?
No, the current, so the
I'm
fiscal year 24 audit, when they really started digging into it and going through all of our general ledgers, all of the accounts, there was a discrepancy in June 2024, which was the last month of fiscal year 2024, which is the audit. There was a $10,000 journal entry for money that was received that wasn't recorded. That in turn led to throwing off fiscal year 25 reconciliation, which we've reconciled for several months. How we were able to do that, if the end number in June of 2024 wasn't accurate, I still don't fully understand. And so we've done the most reconciliation that we can, but just having that final number of bank and trio aligning, we haven't been able to do that because of that discrepancy, knowing that it's not aligning.
Excuse me, when you say we're not able to do that, are you talking about the town of Shabik or the town of Shabik with?
The bookkeeper and myself
Okay.
is who I'm specifically referring to, yeah.
And so Richard, I kind of interrupted you, so what's your thoughts?
Oh, it just seems, well, first of all, I don't think we have an alternative out there ready to.
I don't have a recommendation for another
And
firm.
that
No, I
we
don't.
move forward, and if they mess up again, that's.
Legally,
Not,
what
not.
actions can we take? What legal options do we have if they do not perform? If we give them half of the contract, having delivered the last one completed, and then they're behind, and they continue to be behind, like what are our options? Has the attorney, you talked to the attorney about that at all?
They don't make a commitment in this contract. If
They
you-
don't, yeah.
If you read it closely, there's no deliverable deadline. And it's not like you will get this work product. It's more about what we have to provide, frankly. It's more about what our responsibilities are than what
Yes,
theirs are.
and
So
that's,
it's-
a lot of it has come back to what the town has not provided to date. And that's the conversation that I sat down and had with her. The firm went through a big change in how they collect the information. The previous 21, 22, 23, they've provided me with the link. They've asked us to upload the information. We've uploaded the information. They come into the office and they scan and collect all of this information. And then they follow up with me in terms of, we need more of this or that. That's the process we started last July. Several months in, we were notified that it has now, the process has changed, and the information that were provided was just kind of the collection phase, and now this woman, Michelle, that I worked with, is the one who's gonna be performing and compiling the audit. I had spoken to her. She made it very clear that there was a big disconnect within the firm and the lack of communication that caused the delay. So a lot of the delay was due to their changes and really, in my opinion, not communicating with their clients the process that they were going through. And so that more or less put a pause for several hours of us thinking that they had all the information because we uploaded it the exact same way. And when the communication took place, it was, oh, you need to, and so we started the process all over again. In recent weeks, there's been a lot of back and forth because they needed more information from us, and so we've have emails of information being provided to them, but it wasn't. So I think there's a lot of miscommunication within the firm that has caused a lot of the delays. At the end of the day, it comes down to what the town hasn't provided in the timely fashion, which
And I guess.
I would beg to differ with a lot of
Right,
it.
so
Yeah.
I think the question is, has that been communicated to the town? Did we drop the ball or did they drop the ball? I think, I don't know if there are other, I think there may be other alternatives. I guess I just feel personally obligated when we haven't received a work product from the previous contract. I am personally not, excited about signing a contract for the next phase of work because I just couldn't, if I was them, I would not be demanding this without providing the work product we're due, even if it was potentially on our shoulders. So I guess, those are my thoughts. I think everybody from the board has had a chance to weigh in. But before we go to sort of a vote on it, I think if there's any public comment before we, maybe take it under consideration. So Mark or Herb, anything you guys have?
Yeah, my head's spinning a little bit, because this is very confusing. But the simplest thing is what you've already talked about. I mean, even if you approve this tonight, in order to pay the bill, you would need to put it on a warrant and have it approved, and you're not gonna pay it by Friday anyways. Right?
Well, we can't. It has to be in
It's-
the next fiscal year, right?
No, it is within this warrant.
We've already written the check.
Yes, and it's within this warrant, so if it gets approved, because that was,
I suggest you take it out and tell them that it'll probably come in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Like our audit,
I mean, I'm happy to do whatever, but I'm not doing anything without a direction.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, seriously, I totally agree that to expect, and I don't know when this was communicated, this is the first I've heard about wanting money up front, but I don't know when this, maybe it's been a while, but to sort of expect, well, just what Carol said, I agree with what Carol said and Ari said. And it's not getting this next phase off onto a good foot with them by signing, and it's not a contract, it's an agreement. You can put any stipulation you want on that. And I think putting the stipulation on that we'll send the money when our last year's audit comes is entirely, I mean, you can check with your lawyer, but it's not a contract. We're not changing the language of the contract. We're just putting a stipulation on it. So at a minimum, I would suggest that the board at least does that to send a message. You could also ask that the language I just read it tonight, so I may be misguided here, but it said something like, we will provide a report. Doesn't say anything about when. Doesn't say in a reasonable amount of time. Doesn't say before the next fiscal year. Doesn't say anything. Just they'll provide it someday. It seems like you could ask for a little bit more, even if it wasn't a hard date. You could at least ask for, a reasonable amount of time. We will provide this within a reasonable amount of time after the audit is complete, and I don't know how you determine the audit is complete. They determine that and so our audit is not complete yet, is that?
Correct. So, well, it's the actual document. They sent us a draft document of the audit and then the final one.
But do you get confirmation that you have provided everything that they've asked for? Do you get
That was the call that I had, we've had some emails, and then I requested to communicate through a call, and so I had Google Meets with the auditor just to go through, because there were things that they had said we hadn't provided that I didn't know what they were.
So is there anything in this agreement that says that they will inform you when you have provided everything they required? That would be even another reasonable stipulation from their perspective, that they will communicate to us that, yes, we have received everything from now, and we are at this point in the process, and then we've got to put it together and send it and do drafts and put all the numbers and tables together. But that milestone would be a really good thing, a communication, a letter from them that says, we have received an acknowledgement that we have received everything. Those two things at a minimum seem like they would make sense to me, but.
Yep. Mark?
I realize, at least in the recent past, the firms have not been beating down the doors to deal with small town finances as it relates to final auditing. But this doesn't sound comfortable to me to go into this agreement the way that it's being presented right now. I don't think it's unreasonable, in my opinion, to request some sort of a meeting with this firm to come to some understanding and to hash out some concern, possibly from both directions, before entering into anything like this. Thank you.
Thanks.
I did talk to Marjorie a couple of weeks ago, and Vinyl Haven didn't have their audit back either, which that was very shocking to me, knowing her experience and her background.
David?
I kind of feel like we're over a barrel here. What would happen if we take Mark's advice or anybody else's advice and say, they need to work something out, and they say, okay, goodbye? What happens then?
Then we will need to find a new auditor to complete the fiscal year 25 audit. And I think chances are that it would not be complete in time is by fiscal year 26. Meeting is probably pretty good.
That's the barrel I feel we're on.
Right, but we're already over that barrel.
Right.
We've already been over that barrel in
Yeah.
2024, and I just don't see how they should get a pass. We're gonna pass out $22,000 for the promise that has nothing attached to it, and they haven't even completed the last one. I think it's very reasonable to say that we will, I mean, aside from other things we may wanna have in here, that, let's just say we otherwise agreed with this, that we're happy to make that payment, the 50% payment, when we receive what is currently due to us. Or maybe have a meeting and really sit down, but it's not good faith business, in my opinion. It makes it sound to me like they've got some financial trouble, or maybe staffing issues, and they're trying to raise some money. It's a little bit of a Ponzi scheme here to try to get their wheels rolling. I don't think any of us in our personal business would run our lives that way. I really can't. Until they deliver the deliverable, I don't see, I think it's not a good idea.
So I think we have a couple options on the table. We can, anybody can make a motion. I think we can, not authorize the contract and request a meeting with the firm. Somebody can make a motion to authorize the contract and we can vote on that. I think not authorizing it does present a potential risk, but I agree with Earhart, myself anyway, that I'm a little uncomfortable with, I guess if the firm, I'm not sure I wanna be in business with a firm that's gonna dump us if we don't sign a contract when they haven't even delivered on the previous year. To me, if that's what's happening, maybe we're better off, because I would never do that. I mean, I just can't, I'm trying to put myself as a small business in their shoes. I would not make this demand, ask for half the money up front when I haven't even submitted, I haven't even presented the previous year's report. I agree with Mark, I think it's worth a discussion, so we can kind of make sure I think we either need to sort this out or find a new auditor. That's kind of where I am. And signing this doesn't sort anything out. We will be back in the same place a year from now, and I just don't want to go through that again. I think it's the board's, as Vika said, she has a recommendation. It's up to the board to decide, and that's kind of where I'm at. So if anybody has a motion that they'd like to make, personally, I would like to request a meeting, and that's where I'm at. But I think if the board feels strongly that we should sign the thing, then make a motion.
I do have one question. It does say, unless some foreseeable problems are encountered, the engagement would be completed by June 30, 2026. Does that mean that they expect to be completed by then, because we're talking about deadlines? It doesn't seem like a clear deliverable. Okay.
I don't know, but those are the kind of questions we could ask them if we have a meeting, and that was a recommendation from somebody on the finance committee. And I think either we meet with them and decide we can work with them, and Vika likes the people she's working with right now. I wouldn't say that's been the way it's been the whole time, right? sort of now she's in a position where she feels like they're working with her, but I think the board ultimately is the one tasked with trying to decide whether we should go forward with this or not. And so I'm personally reticent to sign an engagement letter tonight.
And would the meeting be with all of us
Could be.
in the finance committee, or would it be with a representative of the select board and a representative of the finance committee?
I would make it with the whole board, and I think we had considered that back in April, in part to send a message that we wanted the audit completed, and it didn't happen for, I can't recall why, but I think part of it is also to impress upon the firm how serious this is to us. And, you know, if we're just passively back here in the background, you know, that we may not get as much attention. And I do, you know, I hope it's not that the firm is in trouble, but I think we have to realize that could be a possibility.
So does this become a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we request a meeting with the firm, or with all the members of the finance committee to discuss this agreement and our concerns and considerations for moving forward.
I need you to speak a little bit louder and slower.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion that we request a meeting with the auditors to discuss this agreement and express our concerns and arrive at terms that we are agreeable with as a town.
We have the word deliverables in there, or deliverables?
Hold on, we're still writing, sorry. Did you get it?
Yeah.
All right, you're
Is there
good.
a second?
Is there a second on that motion? Great. Any discussion, any further discussion on the motion? So the motion is to request a meeting with the
So-
auditors, and the implication is we aren't going to authorize the town administrator to sign this at the moment. Okay, can I have a vote? All in favor? Okay. And, the 2547 is to review and authorize the town administrator to sign an engagement letter for fiscal year 25 assets with R.H.R. Smith Company CPAs, and this is a separate engagement letter, which I guess is sort of a supplemental task beyond the audit that they have provided to the tune of, I think, $750. So I think,
What's the difference?
So this is separate because what they do is they're not auditing, but what they're doing is they're taking a list of all of the assets. So originally, when they started doing this, we provided them the information that we have from Maine Municipal in terms of everything that the municipality has insured. They took that information and it's not, the finance committee used it as a guide to start creating a list of what the assets are for the town. And so this is just utilizing them in compiling that information for the municipality. I think that it's helpful to an extent, but I think with, in the future, when the finance committee has a far better handle on what the assets are, I don't see that it will be needed in the future. I think for now, if you are not doing anything with the other motion, I would just recommend you table this and take no action on it until you revisit it, because I don't think you need to do one if not the other.
yeah,
So.
so I would agree, we just hold off on this until the end.
Need an option, motion to table, I'll move to table this, so we have more information regarding this issue.
Second on that? Richard, second. Any discussion? discussion on tabling 2547 on the fixed assets. All in favor? All right, so we've gone through the main action items on the agenda. We're now into other business. And for our new board members' benefit, I'm sure you've been can you explain what comes up under other business?
So, under other business, and the reason this agenda item is on here is if there is anything that is more or less pressing that would potentially require a motion, then it would come up under other business, giving the board an opportunity to be able to have the ability to make a motion or take any action on something that wasn't on the agenda. Sometimes it's been things that have come up kind of at the last minute. With the agenda being made, there's usually a gap. And so if it's anything pressing that's needed for me to proceed with whatever the task is, then that's when it gets brought up under other business.
So the only thing I can think of other business might qualify is that sort of what's our process. I mean, you're gonna request a meeting, but once, if and when they agree to a meeting and a date, I think we need to have a plan to pre-meet with ourselves, the board, and the maybe the finance committee, to make sure we have our questions and got our ducks in a row. So we use that time really efficiently and come across firm, but, you know, amiable, and I would think that that might be an important pre-meeting to have. So obviously we can't schedule it now because we don't even know if they'll schedule a meeting, but just.
I bet, I don't see a reason why they wouldn't. I know they've agreed to do it before, so.
And we do have a workshop next Wednesday, a week from today. So, I mean, we will be together, so maybe that's not the best time to do it. It probably is easier to do it just virtually instead of thinking out loud with them. So, yeah. And I would be, to be honest, I'm not sure we've always prepared with a pre-meeting, normally for that kind of a thing. I think the finance committee has reviewed this, I think, I don't know if all of them have, but I know a couple of them have because I've heard from them, but I think in terms of availability, we would probably schedule it, and maybe not everyone can come, but we just have to schedule it, and whoever can be there would be there, right? That's all.
What I'll do is I'll email them back, and I'll CC Carol as the chair on it, and start the discussion about, you know, the municipality not wanting to meet to discuss some concerns about this new process before agreeing to sign it, and then kind of let the ball roll naturally and see whether there are some dates being thrown out, and then communicate that. I think that's an opportunity where communicating that through an email is helpful, as long as the entire board doesn't start engaging on the conversation, and then proceed with setting up a meeting. If it ends up being the entire more than 3 select board, then it would have to be something that's at least 3 business days ahead of schedule. So that's kind of how that would work.
And I think I just as soon have the whole board there if it's possible, so if we have to notice it, we have to notice it.
Yeah.
That's my perspective.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, I think the audit is kind of this, it's a very difficult document to understand, and you know, I think way back we had asked even to meet with them just to explain the audit. This is kind of a different objective, is sort of to, you know, agree on a process, but, you know, I think where we run into trouble with not having the audit is we don't know the balance in the undesignated funds. And so we've had to guess at how much we can bring forward. And we do definitely, we have a meeting, a special town meeting sometime late summer, early fall, and we were hoping to have the number then, so we might make an additional appropriation. So, but we kind of need to know where we stand. And, you know, certainly, you know, having it by the end. I noticed that a lot of the audits this firm prepared were completed at the end of December. And why, so I think normally that's what our hope would be, is to get it by the end of the calendar year. But if not, early in the next, calendar year. But I think that's something we have to be, express to them and see if we can come to an agreement. I would feel a lot better, if we could at least have this discussion. Yeah. So I think that will be the process, to set up a meeting. So I think, is that?
Yeah, the only thing is just that we as a group, it would be good for us to be clear, sort of what are our main talking points, and that we're all clear on that before we go into the meeting, that's all I'm suggesting.
And we can see how it plays out when we might meet with them. And figure out how to do that. It could be that we even meet 15 minutes before and get it straightened out.
Yeah, I think that probably would be a great way to do it, so you're not scheduling different meetings.
Or a half an hour before.
Yeah, yep.
I've heard before, but that would be, excuse me, with the finance committee.
Yeah, we could meet, that would make sense. Frankly, they know more about this than we do in some ways, so I think they're pretty invested in trying to get a handle on the undesignated fund. Does anybody have anything else under other business? I do have something, and I'm not sure. So Ellie, our GP Cog fellow, has been working on sort of trying to come up with a collective purchasing agreement for the town, for Shabig, for property, for residents of Shabig. So she would like to release this request for proposals for residential energy efficiency and electrification purchasing. And I did kind of so she kind of wanted to just send it out as Ellie from Shabig Climate Action Team, and I kind of put the brakes on it, and I'm looking for a little guidance from our town administrator. I do think it sort of has to come from the town. In other words, I don't think the Climate Action Team has no standing in terms of sending out an RFP. So I'm wondering what the best process is for this. I think it's, pretty good what she put together, and I don't want to rain on her parade, but at the same time, I wasn't sure what the best process would be.
With sending out RFPs?
Yeah, and this is something the board has not seen at all. A few members of the Climate Action Team have reviewed it, but I don't feel comfortable having this go out kind of on behalf of the town of Shabig, but through the Climate Action Team without a board review or whatever you think the right process would be.
Historically, the select board, in the couple of years that I've done this, have approved, whether it's an RFP or an RFQ, but the select board would authorize or direct me to advertise it or send them out in the appropriate areas, and then Maine Municipal and is typically the most common place where that goes out, and then a few other places if discussed by the board. And so I would encourage the board to stay consistent through the process and do that, because it is you are the body that ultimately, it's this municipality does have a slightly different setup than a lot of them, and so without having a town manager, this municipality is really solely responsible for a lot of that, so it's your authority to direct somebody to do that.
And the backstory of this is she did a little presentation on energy issues, I don't know, like a month or two ago. And one of the things she did was have a sign-up sheet for people who might be, I think it was online, interested in sort of, weatherization services. So are there like 10 households who would like to bring somebody over? Then it gets cheaper and, people are more interested. I think it's a great idea. But because it's sort of the town that's kind of represented in this, I think we should review it, and I know she's gonna be like, oh, are you kidding me? But that's how it works. So I think what I should request is that she send it to you, you can include it in the packet. And
For next meeting, yeah.
I hate to I don't wanna squelch her enthusiasm, but I think that is the right process, so, okay. So that's
And-
what I thought.
I think that's a good idea, but to send along our gratefulness for this project and appreciation for the work that she's,
Right, and I will say, I see nothing that's particularly time sensitive on this, like, you know.
well, yes, we all need heat.
Right, but I don't think it's not like a grant application that needs to be
Yeah.
in by a deadline, so I think it's got some flexibility. And it will be her introduction to how slow town government can be.
I think she's figuring that out.
Okay, anything else on other business? David?
Yeah, just one, the code of ethics, is that something we need to deal with?
I think Vika mentioned that.
I mentioned that under the TA report, yeah, that's something that you as a board, the previous board approved a few months back. We are going to request that every board member read through it and read it, so we gave you the copy to look over it when you have a chance, which most of you approved this document, so you should have pretty good familiarity with it, but I would like you to sign the back page of it and then hand that back to us, so then we can put it in the personnel file.
Just wanted to confirm that, thank you.
So moving on to item 7, communications. So these are communications we receive either verbally from the community, emails from the community. I will take this point in time to mention if the board gets an email from a community member to the entire board, I believe the protocol is for the chair to acknowledge that email. But given that it's to the board, we don't discuss it via email, and we don't offer our opinion or reply about the content of the email. We just say, thanks, we'll take it up with the board. And so that's something we started doing more recently, and I think that's important, because we do sometimes get emails asking for us to do something, and it's hard not to respond. If you get an email individually, then you can respond, but not on behalf of the board. You can say, I'll take it to the board, and that's generally how we should respond if it's relative to a board-related matter. So, but if someone's complaining about something, that's when we would, if we get an email about anything related to town business, then we bring it up in communications.
So if someone brings up there's a problem, an issue, whatever they have, and we've received that, do we discuss it
Yeah.
here? We discuss it
We
here,
can, yeah.
so, okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there'll be you'll learn, if you receive an email about somebody telling you that something is broken, or there is a step missing or something, with something like that, you wouldn't wait to discuss it to the board or for a board to make decision. You would kind of let me know, we would direct the department to go fix it. But if it's something where you as a board need to make a decision or a motion, then it would need to be discussed and brought to the board.
A request on Main Street.
Right, so recently, just in the past few days, we got an email to the whole board and Vika about a hazard in the road that was then addressed, and so
I did not get that email.
you responded.
Yeah. Just Betsy
That's in the heat.
McGee.
think
I
you
responded,
right?
no, because it was the town clerk was the one who let me know about it. I had no
Yeah, the
idea.
town responded.
Well,
Okay,
Yeah.
yes,
there was a response to the individual saying it would be dealt with, so I
Yep.
didn't notice that it was.
Yeah.
And may I add, it was done by the end of that day.
Yeah.
And the person who initiated the email was quite
Great.
Yeah.
Good work.
Good work. And I would say the other thing that happens a lot is somebody comes up to you and makes a complaint to you personally, and what I try to tell them almost all the time is make it, because people will not hear that same thing at the town office, and so, particularly parking. I'm getting, all time, you're on the road, somebody starts complaining about the parking, I'll say.
make a formal complaint.
Make a formal complaint or send the email to the board, because you can't really act on kind of hearsay that we're here. I mean, it's just not
Yeah.
great. And, a lot of people won't follow through on that, that's a reality.
Majority of them will not.
And so it sort of comes under communication, but I just wanted to let people know that tomorrow there's a meeting here on, at it's a workshop on coastal resilience, trying to get a sense from the community of what issues they think are the high priority issues to address. And this is sort of an outgrowth of the work that the Climate Action Team has done. It was a grant that we received from the coastal program to kind of start thinking about how to make the community more resilient to climate change in terms of our land use ordinances and our comp plan. So it's the beginning of that work. And given that we were looking at a stabilization project at the planning board meeting last week, it seemed like a good time. It was already scheduled, but it follows up on that, where there was some concern expressed by the community, but I don't think our ordinance really is well designed to address those things. So I would encourage board members to come. I think it's going to be about an hour here at the hall.
What time, 6?
6 o'clock at the hall. So that's, I think that's all I have. And I do think, like Vika said in the beginning, just the other thing is, if you can think of anybody who's willing to join either the planning board or the board of appeals, and you speak, you know, maybe, I really think it's urgent. To the point where I feel like I should be doing that instead of this, because, no, but I mean, I really think the planning board is kind of fragile, only having 3 people, and it's also not an optimal size group to make those decisions, and the same for the board of appeals, so I just.
Has anyone I've spoken with turned in their paperwork for the Board of Appeals? Yeah, no? Okay.
I don't have any applications for Board of Appeals, no.
Okay.
And currently.
I have 2 people that have agreed to,
Okay.
in theory, join the Board of Appeals.
Okay, and the only, just to be aware, the criteria for both planning board and board of appeals right now is you have to be a resident.
I know that now.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
the planning board offered to change, I mean, had proposed changing that, it was shot down, but maybe we should revisit that.
But not for appeals, but for planning, right?
Both.
Either one, yeah, I mean, other towns do allow that.
Okay,
Okay,
I'll follow
so
up with that.
anything else under communications?
I have one that I would like to share. So I received an email recently from MEMA, which is the Maine Emergency Management Agency, and what they're doing is, so I'll read a little bit, and I am happy to forward this, but they want to let the municipalities know that there could be potential an opportunity for MEMA to secure federal funding for up to $6.75 million for programs. And what this is specific is for Maine, it would be the Maine First Mitigation Revolving Loan Fund. And so it would be a very low interest rates, which I want to say it could be offered at 1% interest or less. So for perspective, the loans that the town has, which we have a number of them through the Maine Bond Bank, they are between like 3 and 6.5%, 7% now. So it's very expensive to get loans at this point. What this is it is asking for municipalities to not apply. It's not an application. The deadline isn't until July 25th. But what it is asking municipalities to submit examples of projects that they could potentially want to be interested or may want to see if they could apply. And so the first thing that came to my mind would be potentially South Shore Drive or East Shore Drive, any future permanent projects or very much more sustainable than what is there now. And so some examples would be drainage, stormwater improvement, shoreline stabilization, building code adoption and enforcement, aquifer recharge and storage, structure or road evaluation. So there are several things that this municipality is working on that potentially would be applicable. And so I hope that the board would be interested in submitting information, because what they're doing is they're gathering to see how many municipalities would be interested to then proceed to this. And so I would like to, on the behalf of the board, potentially work with a couple board members to come up with a couple of different projects that this could potentially be applicable to. It's not an application, we're not committing to anything, it's just letting MEMA know that we would have anticipated projects that we'd be interested in, and, you know, and I don't know what the process is like. I wasn't gonna dig further into it without knowing that you guys are interested in it, and I hope you are, because you could be helpful, I think.
Could this include work that needs to be done at the Stone Pier as well?
Engineering studies, risk assessment, structure or road evaluation, acquisition, demolition, developing local hazard mitigation plan. So there's structure or road, I read that, but I will forward this to you so you could see it. There is, and you can read through the information, but there is an area for project proposals. So you're answering some questionnaires to gather some information for them. And so I do hope that the board is in support of possibly doing that. And I'm happy to kind of provide some of the information with some ideas that I have, and then bring that to the board. And then if you all agree, we can provide it. But at the end of the day, it's just information for them to gather at this point. It's not any applications.
It's safe to say we could give them a couple of municipalities worth of projects that would be interested in their.
I think that they're gonna, my suspicion is they're gonna get a lot of information that is going to exceed well and beyond the 6.7 that they would have available, so. But I will email this all to you. I didn't want to email it any sooner because I was waiting for everyone to have the emails, and I got this a few days ago, so I'll forward it to all of you.
So now you want people to agree to work with you on this? Or did you wait until?
Let me look through to see what the process is actually like, and then see if I can kind of start the process of filling out, and then I can share it with all of you, and then that might be easier. And then I also did receive an email recently from Lisa from GEI, who we're working with, and she forwarded and CC'd Carol on it, and it's another funding opportunity, something that the town could potentially look into, and it's through the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry. It is a annual funding allocation and $7.5 million. Maximum funding amount is $250,000. The application deadline isn't until September. 10% cash for match, but there is a slew of different things that improvement to trail access. The first thing that I thought to this was potentially if it could be something that we can apply for relative to all of the different municipal access to shore projects. And if the municipality were to apply for a grant, we'll, right around the same time as this deadline, we'll have the Island Institute Fellow, who that's one of the projects that she's working on. That was kind of the first thing that came to my mind, but this is another thing that we can forward to the rest of you, that I think there is some value in maybe digging a little further in that grant.
And I think that's we passed a bond about a year ago for trails, and, the state, remember, not this past year, but the year prior, we passed a bond to cover sort of trails and outdoor recreation for, municipalities, nonprofits. I think that's where the money's coming from. So, anyway, it's, I think it's worth exploring, because we really don't have a good source of funds for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's small areas in reserve accounts, but if you can apply, so the eligibility is, project design and engineering, direct project administration, construction, supplies, consultant, so this could be really a great opportunity for improve the access to shores that have been damaged, really provide a clear outline of what they are, where they are, and have something that the income and insurance could work on, so.
Is this something we could supply in advance to Loren? She starts on September 1st, but she's been in frequent communication about ideas and things, so is this something I can share with you?
I would strongly discourage us providing information to somebody that doesn't have a specific set date. Now, you as a board can agree to something different. I also would recommend that an intern that's starting on September 1st is not one that's going through an application process trying to submit a grant relative.
Just to be familiar.
Well, it's okay. I don't think we wanna engage her before she's.
I don't want to do any engagement about future work without her actually starting, so.
And under communication, I had a brief conversation with Eliza Jane. One of the things, based on something Earhart said, I was thinking that perhaps the select board could take responsibility for writing just a paragraph or something in the monthly newsletter about where we're at, what we're doing.
Right.
And so I think we could rotate it around the board so nobody's doing it all the time. Unless somebody wants to do it, it could be either way, but I kind of feel like it should come from the board, not Vika's responsibility, not Ellie's responsibility, but us. And it can be just to bring people up to speed on, either what we're working on or what's gonna come up. And so I was just trying to get a sense, because if we wanted to put something in the July calendar, it would need to be in, but the deadline is a little rough. It's the 20th, and I literally submitted something at 12:22 once, and it didn't go in. So they are very strict. So if people are interested, somebody could offer to take a stab at the first one, or I would do it if nobody wants to do it, but I kind of think this could improve people's, people read that, they don't always go to the town website, or the same people that might go to the town website might not be the same people that read the newsletter, let's put it that way. And so I do think it's another avenue to reach out to people, so I was just wondering how folks think about that.
Good idea.
Thanks, great.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yep.
I think that if you are interested in doing something, I think that the first one, I think would be really great if it came from the chair, just opening up, this is what, and then, maybe not necessarily provide a lot of information, but just, this is what we're trying to do as a board, keep an ear out. And then the next one could be the vice chair, and then you can proceed. So then that could be an introduction with a.
So one question I have is I do feel like it should be reviewed by the rest of the board. So is that an okay exercise that we send out a draft document and people can provide their suggested edits and it gets finalized, or is that not okay to do?
So I think that's where really utilizing SharePoint.
Yeah, okay.
And the
edits could all go.
You can have one document, you can type it up, upload it, all of you have access to it, you can go in and you can provide your own suggestions. You're not communicating, you're not making decisions, you're not providing direction, you're working collectively on a document. So I think that's where hopefully we can, now that we have our system a lot better organized, with the new board, we can try to create that smooth process that I think that's where it's a great opportunity for that shared working space.
Is that Office 365 or
Yeah, so
would it
is
be
it,
just a Word document? Or?
it's a shared, it's sort of like Google Drive when you have a shared Google document, only it's in Microsoft. But it's on the town server, so
Yeah.
it's not on anybody's.
I can
computer.
connect, if you want to connect with me individually, I can kind of show you what I go through and have access, and then Ion could assist you in making sure that you have access to everything you need access to.
So what I will do, because the deadline, I think we should try to get something in the July calendar, so if people are on board with this idea, I'll write something up tomorrow, I'm gonna keep it short, give them the time frame, and kind of like Vika said, saying this is kind of an initiative, here's who the board is, blah, blah, blah. And, we're gonna meet, whatever, the next meeting is, whenever. But I'll keep it small, I think I'll work with you on the SharePoint site just to make sure everybody can see it. And what I'll do is send out an email and say it's on the SharePoint site, and if you have trouble accessing it, maybe it would be best if they check in with you about that.
Yeah, that's fine.
If you can email it to you or something. It's not gonna be earth shattering, but it would, I think we would have to go through a process where people do review it so that it represents the board.
And I would think also, I assume that Vika would be included in the
Yeah, oh
access,
yeah.
so to make sure we don't.
I have access to all of it.
Yeah, and I would say as a general rule, I think we always copy Vika. I mean, anything I do related to town business, I copy Vika. It's pretty, unless it's like a communication with one person that, is just not relevant to her, but any kind of official communication, particularly like the outside consultants or anything like that, I always copy Vika because she needs to know what you're doing. So I try to do that as a rule. And so we'll try this, I'll keep it short on the first one, and then we can kind of go through a schedule, but I think it would help to kind of start communicating in that way, and then if there's other avenues people want to reach out to, if you want, the town Instagram page or whatever, post, I don't know, I mean, not for me, but. Yep, otherwise Jane's ready to go.
I think that, look, having it in the calendar is really a great way to reach a strong segment of the population here, but there's a whole other population
Yeah, I know.
that needs to look at social media. So my big question is, would any posting need to be approved by the entire select board, or would it be approved just by Vika? So this is a whole big conversation if we're looking at a social media presence.
I think that's very uncharted territories, and I think that's where, in conversations with the town attorney and having that direction, is where I would recommend you seek from him.
Yeah, I think that would be a good
Yeah.
topic of conversation with him, and.
How to do it, when to do it, it,
Because it
Yeah.
needs to be, like, there are other towns that do it, it needs to have no capacity for comments or feedback, it's just one-way direction. And so I think that has some validity as well.
Well, so I think when we meet with them, sort of communication can be on the
yes.
agenda, and I know towns have had some challenges, we've been relatively lucky compared to some towns. All right, so I guess, the next, is there anything else under communications? So the next thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from June 4th, 2025, which Chris sent out the other day, and, I think Gerhard and Mark are over them, so you don't need to act on that. So has everybody had a chance, has everybody seen them? Because I'm not sure, Chris, they just went out like a day ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you have, okay.
Yeah.
So can I have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Second, okay. All in favor of approving the minutes of June 4th, 2025? Okay. So next is items to be placed on a future agenda. Anybody have anything? And I guess,
The communication thing of like going,
yep. And I think, Bob has, I don't know where that's. is that
I have
still
it.
somewhere?
Yeah.
So Bob was keeping sort of a running spreadsheet of things that we would want to revisit for a future agenda, and so. we try to add to that and revisit it to make sure we don't miss things. And I do think sometime before the end of the summer, we had talked about a parking meeting, and we maybe even want to think
Yep.
about scheduling it because
Yep.
of the way the world goes in the summer. So I think that's just one thing that maybe at
That's on a
the-
future
At the next
agenda.
meeting, we could consider just picking a date for that, because you'd think that that's what people live and die for, is parking on street.
Sometimes it feels wrong, living, other times feels wrong, down.
Anything else for our future agenda that anybody can think of? Not at the moment.
I have a list of things
Yeah.
that's in that, yeah, in that thing.
And so the next time we'll get together is next Wednesday, the 25th, and it will be for the workshop on South Shore Drive that GEI is presenting, but I think we may have a pre-meeting, if that works out, that people will let us know about. Because it's a good opportunity, since you'll be here, to go through a bunch of these outstanding projects. So I think we'll take advantage of that. And then think of the next board meeting.
July 2nd, I believe is the date. It is, yep, Wednesday, July 2nd.
And then Vika had put out the comment last meeting, you know, sometimes the board has opted to meet only once a month in the summer. I think you made the comment that we have a lot going on. I kind of agree. One thing we thought about was, well, we could potentially meet, instead of 2 Wednesday night meetings, maybe change the meeting to some other time if people want to change pace. So I would suggest that the meeting on July 2nd, we think about the meeting schedule for the rest of the summer. And
How do we handle abstinence when it's my brother's celebration of life? I will be out of state.
you just tell us, we can actually also change the meeting date if that's preferable.
Yes.
And I think given that you're just doing the
Do the
board,
day before.
yeah, I'm willing to do that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
So,
My brother's celebration of life is, I'll be gone on the 2nd. So we're leaving, but I can do the day before.
is that, how do people feel about that? Anything else going on the first weekend?
Tuesday, July 1st,
That's further from the 4th, which sounds preferable anyway.
yeah.
So let's do that. Does that work for everybody? Okay. Tuesday, July 1st, right?
Tuesday, July 1st.
July 1st, sorry.
First day of the new fiscal year.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so we're meeting on the first instead of the first of July.
First instead of the 2nd of July.
Yeah, that's right, first and second.
And those of you, a couple of you have a lot of interest in improving communication, so I think if you have other ideas, like, you know, Saturday morning coffee hour, or whatever, bring it forward, you know. I know Eliza James has some thoughts and things like that, so.
Yeah, I'm busy putting this on my calendar, but yeah, I think, Carol, if you could consider, if we could discuss it for a bit now and have that be in your submission to the calendar, to have office hours with select board people, that would be a great way to introduce.
I think I guess I would be inclined to just make this an introductory email to, column to people, and maybe on the next one, just because at this time of night, I'm not sure I think we should, you know, bring it up as a topic and talk about it, so that we know what we're committing to. I don't really feel comfortable in 24 hours putting that in writing and getting it in the newsletter,
Okay,
for me.
we'll have it on the social media.
Yeah, I think you probably have a good idea of what you're thinking of, but
I think that should be a separate agenda item
Okay,
entirely, yeah.
because I think it's one of the challenges is when you do that, you gotta remember you're the board and you're representing the group and how you do that.
And if it's not part of an existing policy, then you're creating something new and different that then you're expecting others to follow. And so you might want to improve and adjust the communication policy that exists if you want to make some of those specific changes.
And I think there's, you know, there is actually,
Yeah, well, scans.
yeah, but I mean, you know where they are, because we didn't even know they existed for a while.
But the communication policy, I think, is in that nice reading packet that I gave him.
All right, so I think, can I have a motion to adjourn?
David?
Second? All in favor?
8:41?
Thank you.
Thank you.